every view, from every angle. This is Newstalk ZB News.
It's 4 o'clock. I'm Sandy Hodge. US President Donald Trump's ordering Iran to make peace quickly or risk further US strikes. International geopolitical analyst Jeffrey Miller told the Weekend Collective it's a huge escalation that Iran won't take lightly.
It's madness. I mean, this could bring us on the brink of World War III.
Streaming live on iHeartRadio. This is Newstalk ZB News.
It's 5 o'clock. Good afternoon. I'm Joe Gilfillan. International geopolitical analyst Jeffrey Miller told Newstalk ZB's Weekend Collective US involvement is madness that could bring us to the brink of World War III.
Look, if you're attacked by the United States, you're going to respond. This was a preemptive, unprovoked attack from Iran's perspective, and they are not going to take this lying down. So it's a huge escalation here.
We'll be keeping you across this story as events unfold.
But right now, welcome to the Weekend Collective. It is 9 minutes past 3.
Politics Central.
Yes, so, of course, as you will have heard in the news, the USA has struck Iran, with Donald Trump saying the United States has carried out a successful attack on 3 Iranian nuclear sites, leaving them totally obliterated, his words, bombing, despite Trump initially giving a couple of weeks to de-escalate tensions, so a negotiation. But, of course, surprise, I guess, is key. US lawmakers are already reacting, generally down party lines, with some saying he made the right call and the others saying it was not constitutional, a risky move that only escalates US involvement in another war. And of course, we know that Chris Luxon is on the way to Europe with the NATO summit on Tuesday. And international geopolitical analyst Jeffrey Miller is with us. Jeffrey, good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Tim.
Surprised?
I think what was surprising was only the timing. I think it's become clear that the US was getting closer to conducting the strike on Iran. They were getting all their assets positioned in the region, but they've also engaged in a bit of a deception campaign over the last week or so, making it hard to guess exactly what was going to come and when. And I think that 2-week deadline that you mentioned was all part of the strategy. It was all a great ruse, a great deception to try and keep Iran guessing about what was going to come. But it has come, and Donald Trump has put his weight behind Israel, and he's taken the United States into war with Iran. It's quite a moment.
When will we have confirmation? He used the word obliterated, but it's probably too early to actually confirm what damage was done. How and when will we know if their nuclear capabilities have been degraded?
Well, I imagine the US military will have all kinds of military satellite capabilities that civilians don't have access to, and they'll be looking at those and using those to sort of work out just how much of their facilities have been destroyed. The Fordo facility is very much deep underground, and I've seen some analysis which suggests that even US bunker busting bomb would have a hard job of really destroying those facilities completely. They've been built with bunker buster bombs in mind, and the Iranians are not stupid. They are aware that these would be very high-value targets for the United States or Israel, so they've constructed these facilities accordingly. But it's probably the case that if they haven't been destroyed, they've certainly been degraded heavily, and they will have set back the Iranians' attempt to build a nuclear weapon, if that is what they're doing, by several years. That's certainly what the Israeli officials are saying at the moment.
What's your take? Was it the right decision to do what they've done?
No, it's madness, Tim. I mean, this could bring us on the brink of World War III, and we wait to see what Iran's response will be. But they're going to see any US assets in the region as a target. So the United States has bases all throughout the Gulf, the likes of Bahrain, Qatar, the United Arab Emirates, Saudi Arabia. They're just across the Strait of Hormuz from Iran. This is a very, very, very dangerous region, really, for escalation. And Iran will respond. They will retaliate. They're not going to take this lying down. I think that's what Donald Trump wants them to do, is to give up, completely surrender, and then there'll be no more bombing. If they give up on their nuclear program. But I just think, look, if you're attacked by the United States, you're going to respond. This was a preemptive, unprovoked attack from Iran's perspective, and they are not going to take this lying down. So it's a huge escalation here.
What does it mean for the influence that Netanyahu has with Donald Trump?
I think I come back to the idea that there's been some deception, and I think there's been some deception going on all year, because if you recall, Donald Trump went to the Gulf states and he didn't visit Israel, and there was some talk that Donald Trump is not that close with Benjamin Netanyahu, that he's unhappy with Benjamin Netanyahu. That's why Israel's not getting a visit. I think this might have been all but in one big deception, and perhaps these plans have been worked out over the past few months that the the United States would go in and support Israel and bomb Iran. And we've got these competing narratives, and it's hard to make out sometimes. We have the sort of more isolationist wing of the Republican Party, and J.D. Vance, the vice president, normally seem to be closer to that wing, the ones who don't want forever wars and new wars. And then you have the hawks, the likes of Marco Rubio, Pete Hegseth. It's certainly the case, whatever has transpired, that the hawks have certainly got Trump's attention and that they've prevailed here.
Hadn't Trump spoken recently with Netanyahu on the phone? And I guess the reason I'm mentioning that is in the context of, a couple of months ago, Tulsi Gabbard was saying our intelligence is they're not building a bomb, and all of a sudden Trump's overruling his own director of national intelligence and seems to be going along with the Israeli narrative.
Indeed. I mean, there are pictures that have come out of the Situation Room where this decision was made in the past few hours, where Donald Trump ordered the bombing to begin, and there's no sign of Tulsi Gabbard, the DNI, as they call her. So it seems that she's been sidelined. I mean, she walked back some of her comments yesterday and said she'd been quoted out of context, etc. So she'd clearly been lent on to do that. She's kept her job. She hasn't resigned. So she's clearly not that principled enough to leave her job over this. But she's certainly not, I think, she's not in the front row of decision makers. That Donald Trump, Pete Hegseth, J.D. Vance, they seem to be leading the strikes.
There's a little bit of guessing we have to indulge in here, isn't it? But would you be confident that this decision was based on some sort of solid intelligence or more on the whim of Trump with Netanyahu in his ear?
I think Donald Trump is very persuadable, and it's often said with Donald Trump that he's influenced by the last person he talked to, and I think he's just got on board that we've got to destroy the nuclear facilities. And over the past couple of weeks, he's seen the Israeli campaign, and Benjamin Netanyahu's probably been on the phone with him repeatedly saying, we've got to finish the job, Mr. President. This is a golden opportunity. We won't get this chance again to destroy Iran's nuclear program. Let's go in there for the kill. And that's what's happened ultimately. And the big question is whether it does stop here or not. I mean, Donald Trump came out saying peace or tragedy. You either capitulate now entirely or you'll get more where that came from. And that's the big question, whether what Iran will do now. They've just been attacked. Will they respond against the United States? I mean, they'd be perfectly entitled to do so.
Yeah.
But it may lead to the end of the regime, because if the United States then comes in and tries to wipe out the regime entirely. But then I think you've got to also think, well, what are other countries going to do? What is Russia going to do? Iran has been supplying all kinds of weaponry to Russia for the war in Ukraine. Does Russia come in? What does China do? What do other regional powers do in this conflict? And that's why it's so scary. And to come back to that point I made at the outcome, that we could be on the brink of a wider regional war. We could be on the brink of World War III. I don't think some of these comparisons are that ill-placed. Winston Peters was just speaking in the last 10, 15 minutes or so, and he said it's the biggest crisis he's ever had to deal with as a foreign minister, what we're facing now. He compared it with the Cuban Missile Crisis of 1962.
So how closely will Trump be watching his internal reaction from the MAGA anti-war people and just the way it plays out with his own supporters?
Look, I think he'll just be listening to the people who agree with him right now. I think the anti-war faction is gone now, in a way, from the Trump White House. It seemed very strong, but you saw Donald Trump's response to Tucker Carlson last week, who conducted that interview with Ted Cruz, the Republican senator, who's a very much a hawk and very much in favour of attacking Iran. And Ted Cruz couldn't even say roughly how many people lived in Iran. He didn't seem to know anything about the country. But Donald Trump was very critical of Tucker Carlson, and I think the hawks have got Donald Trump's ear at the moment. So I think that those are the people that Donald Trump will be listening to. I don't think he's going to care much about the Tulsi Gabbard, Tucker Carlson, these kinds of figures. I don't think he's going to care about this wing of the party anymore.
He also said there in his his brief stand-up, which was surprising because he can talk for quite a while, he said there are many targets left. Is that the sort of rhetoric which is supposed to signal to Iran, you better be careful about your response because we could do more?
Indeed. So that's the threat. Well, you just have to completely capitulate, a bit like Japan at the end of World War II when the nuclear bombs were dropped on Hiroshima and Nagasaki. You've got to give up completely, surrender, or you'll be obliterated, and it will be regime change. And this is madness. If I have to come back to that, what we're dealing with, it's a powder keg there that Donald Trump has now unleashed in the Middle East. I mean, what was happening was already bad enough with Israel's direct war with Iran. I mean, we just haven't seen this, Tim. This takes us back at least to the Iraq war when it comes to the United States. With Israel, in the 45 years or so of the existence of the Islamic Republic of Iran, we hadn't had a direct confrontation between Israel and Iran until last year, when we had two very limited rounds of strikes in April and October. And now we've got an all-out war between Israel, the United States, and Iran. It is unprecedented.
So analysts, other analysts have warned of a dangerous escalation, of course. What are the most likely sort of initial responses from Iraq? If their oil transit routes, military bases, they've also got, the Houthis and other regional proxies. What's your take on it?
Well, you have Strait of Hormuz, which is a very narrow waterway that separates the Persian or Arabian Gulf with the Gulf of Oman and the wider Indian Ocean. And it's only 33 kilometres at its narrowest point, and 20 to 30% of the world's entire supplies of oil flow through that narrow waterway, mainly from the likes of Saudi Arabia, Qatar, the United Arab Emirates, the UAE. Iran could blockade that strait conceivably. It could also attack ships in that strait conceivably, which would be the same as blockading it. The United States has bases dotted around the Gulf. There's all manner of US aircraft. Many of them have been shifted out of the bases temporarily, but they are still stationed within the wider region. They're a lot closer than Israel is, so it's easier for Iran to strike back with shorter range missiles, and they've got large stockpiles of these shorter range missiles. So those are some of the consequences that could happen, that could unfold.
Is Trump's lucky last question, I guess, is Trump's unpredictability something that might actually give the Iranians pause when it comes to how they respond? Because they would have no idea as to the proportionality of how far he's prepared to go.
Look, I think Iran may well roll the dice on World War III here and gamble, because I think they've been humiliated already, and I just think that the regime, they're just not going to put up with this. And being attacked and like this by the United States, I just think it would be a humiliation with their own people if they didn't respond. And I just think, going back to New Zealand's role in all of this with Christopher Luxon, he is in Europe, he is going to be at the NATO summit, and this is New Zealand's chance to step up here, to speak up and to condemn these strikes by the United States, to advocate further for dialogue and diplomacy. Winston Peters has already been using those words. Winston Peters has warned of catastrophic consequences. Christopher Luxon has warned of a catastrophic escalation and said that the Middle East doesn't need more military escalation. I think New Zealand needs to put words into action here. New Zealand needs to step up and speak up, and it needs to offer its good offices, I think, as part of those efforts. New Zealand can only play a small role, but New Zealand does have good relations with many of the Gulf states. Christopher Luxon was there in the UAE earlier in the year. New Zealand has good relations with other players as well, China, for example. So I think New Zealand needs to be stepping up here. Christopher Luxon, Winston Peters, Judith Collins, they need to be working the phones. And I think they need to sacrifice their agenda to bring New Zealand into AUKUS Pillar 2 and get closer with the United States and so forth. I think that was yesterday. I think the situation we're dealing with today is a very scary one. It's quite a frightening escalation, and it could have real impacts on New Zealand, even though we're very far away from the region, obviously. But just think of the price of oil. If you think of $3 a litre petrol, it could be coming your way very soon.
Yeah. Hey, Jeffrey, I really appreciate your time this afternoon. I hope you're sort of wrong with
I hope I am too.
Yeah.
In all honesty, I really hope I'm wrong too. But that's why we need to speak up at this time, Tim. And this is the time for New Zealand to step up. And I think Christopher Luxon is capable of doing that. And he's in the right place this week. He'll be at the NATO summit in The Hague. So all the people are going to be there, from Donald Trump right through to the German Chancellor, the UK Prime Minister. Everyone's going to be there. So it's really worth Christopher Luxon speaking up now. He's got a chance. Yeah.
do have one other question, because we have an incredibly experienced foreign minister in the former Winston Peters. Cometh the hour, cometh the man, I guess. Who is the key player in terms of diplomacy, whether it be behind the scenes or in front of the scenes? Is it Luxon or Peters or both?
Look, they work as a team, and the foreign minister is always there, but the prime minister is ultimately the most senior figure, the most senior player. And Winston Peters was saying in his press conference just in the last half hour that he needed to talk to the prime minister. So they'll be working on a coordinated response, and that's right and proper. It should be a coordinated response for New Zealand. It should be a response to advocate for peace and to condemn this wider escalation and to condemn the strike by the United States. And that would be a big step to make, but I think it would be very much in keeping with New Zealand's independent foreign policy. And sometimes you need to speak strongly to your friends. And the United States is a friend, but they've made the wrong decision here.
Okay. Jeffrey, I really appreciate your time this afternoon. I really very much. Thanks so much, and all the best for the afternoon. Fingers crossed, eh?
Indeed. Thanks, Tim.
There we go. That's Jeffrey Miller, international geopolitical analyst. We'll be doing told.